This program is brought to you by Globus.
Undermining the philosophy of globalization, or probably the concept of living together, and we are focusing on a reparation war, and of course looking at a very problematic statement that came from UK Reform Party pertaining the issue of demanding reparations. And so ladies and gentlemen, we know slave trade and reparations are a topic that has again seized some global attention, especially in the 21st century. It has gained traction, especially after Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama succeeded in getting the UN to recognize slavery as the gravest crime committed against humanity. The move, which attracted mixed reactions, has revived memories of total subjugation of Africans and others during the transatlantic slave trade from the 15th to the 19th century. The motion aimed at acknowledging centuries of exploitation and demanding compensation from former colonial powers has provoked, of course, complex reactions, and that is what our focus is this day, looking at this political statement coming from the UK Reform Party that we are going to unveil subsequently. So while the issue was slowly fading from the headlines regarding the UN recognition of slavery as the gravest crime against humanity, a statement from UK's Reform Party has opened a new era of interpretations on international cooperation, where anti-immigration sentiment challenge the very core fabric of human-to-human existence or diplomacy. And according to Nigel Farage from UK, if in part, that is after the 2029 elections in Britain, it would deny visas to people from countries seeking amends for transatlantic slavery. And at this juncture, we can see that the political figure has at this moment weaponized visas. What interpretation can we give this, and how would this affect foreign policy dynamics between the United Kingdom and Commonwealth nations, particularly African countries? Does this represent a functional political agenda or a diplomatic slip-up? The discourse on slavery is therefore crucial and complex. Thus, tactically interpreting the stakes will set a common ground for dialogue of decency to cement cordial relations between nations and phase out unhealthy narratives created to justify slavery. So together with our resource persons, we decode the stakes of the Ghana-led agenda on slavery and reparations, and how this can translate into a practical or functional emancipation and development of the African continent. Remember, acknowledging slavery as the gravest crime against humanity is just a preamble. To what extent this will change the course of affairs between Africa and the rest of the world remains an issue of utmost importance that we actually need to decode with a panel of experts to understand the stakes involved and how to navigate this, especially with the African Union at the fore, given that this year running 2026 to 2030 2036 has been named as a decade of reparations. So just after the jingle, I will join you to unveil this panel of experts as we continue to give meaning to the topic of slavery reparations and how it is still very relevant in a contemporary society. And let me join you right after the jingle. You all, if you are just tuning in, this is Global Insider. Without much ado, let's acknowledge the presence of Dr. Achille Eki, corporate finance expert, CEO, Washington Valuation Group, who's joining us from Washington, D.C. A pleasure having you to discuss this very timely topic, Dr. Eki. Dr. Achille
The line seems to be breaking up a little bit, but I can hear. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
All right. Great. All right. So thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it. The debate is, the subject is important because of the historic nature of this topic from European countries in general. So I'm glad to be part of your panel today. Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you for actually accepting this invitation. Like you've said, a whole lot is making headline news, but then we still give relevance, especially to reactions coming from European countries that have been identified as being very, instrumental in the slavery, or probably the inhumane act that actually caused untold horror in the African continent, especially affecting the African mind. And we stay with you, Minister Ambi Fokwa, Director of the Association for Cultural Awareness. Thank you for joining us to discuss on this timely topic, which is relevant not just across Africa, but across the global arena.
It's breaking so much.
Actually, very unfortunate, Clarisse. I didn't hear the end of your question there.
Just welcoming you to the show at this moment.
Stable.
It's just an introductory phase, welcoming you to this edition of Global Insider. And we go to Algeria. Let's acknowledge Professor Laïd Zaklame, Algiers University, Faculty of Information and Communication. A pleasure having you this day, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. For your invitation. I'm so pleased and excited to join you. Hope the technical side will be resolved. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we are working to solving the problem to ensure that all goes well, ladies and gentlemen. Also joining us is Mr. Kofi Don Ago, who is joining us from Paris in France, and President CCLG Africa Ghana EPA NAP project ambassador. It's a pleasure having you this day on the program.
Yeah, Clarisse, thank you so much. And once again, I also add my voice to it. I'm so excited and happy to be part of this discussions. And I think it's a very important topic for us to discuss from African point of view. And so we're looking forward for beautiful discussions, and we're hoping that at the end of the day, it will bring us something good. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you so much for giving importance in spite of the Dr. Achille Eki giving us holistically a presentation on the topic which actually zooms on the comments made by the UK Reform Party, weaponizing visa as far as reacting to the UN resolution of votes on the acknowledgement of the slavery as the gravest crime committed against humanity.
Right, thank you, thank you. So Reform UK, which is a right-wing party in the UK, that party is threatening to punish nations that dare to speak of reparations. It's not just a bad policy. It's the latest attempt to police the very memory of empire. It tells Africans and Caribbeans everywhere, you may live with the consequences of our history, but you may not name its cost. So for Pan-Africanists, this moment is clarifying. Reparations are not a begging bowl. They are a political demand that the wealth extracted from African bodies, African lands, and African futures be acknowledged and addressed. From the whole of the slave ship to the colonial tax office, Britain and its allies built structural advantage on African dispossessions. That debt did not vanish because the accounting became uncomfortable. Instead of engaging with this history, Reform UK proposes a visa blacklist for countries that raise reparations, an attempt to make African and Caribbean governments choose between their citizens' dignity and their citizens' mobility. It weaponizes borders to silence claims that are being advanced through legitimate diplomatic and legal channels. But intimidation cannot erase the facts. Right? So across the Caribbean, CARICOM states have articulated clear programs, truth-telling, public apologies, development, education, and technology. Across Africa, leaders and civil society, debt, illicit financial flows, and underdevelopment to the unfinished business of enslavement and colonization. Reparations in this modern sense are about restructuring relationships. Statements about reparations can provoke such panic. Imagine what coordinated economic, diplomatic, and cultural strategies could do. Where former empires still hold vetoes over our narratives and our people's movement. Britain has a choice. It can stand with those in its own society who want honest reckoning, shared learning, and a new compact with the global south. Or it can cling to a brittle imperial nostalgia enforced by travel bans and cultural wars. Africans have a choice too, to allow our agenda to be not the end of the struggle, but they are a line in the sand. When a political party in London threatens to shut its doors because we ask for justice, the answer from Lagos, Kingstown, Accra, Johannesburg, and from African neighborhoods in Birmingham and London must be the same. Our history is not up for negotiation, and our dignity is not subject to your visa policy. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. And of course, it's a statement that has been made, but then interpretation is actually vital, like you have outlined clearly. Dr. Ashil Eki, what then can we make of such a political discourse, of course, especially in a moment that Africa is restructuring its international standing, and in the same perspective, bring into context this topic for discussion. Let's go to Paris in France to meet Kofi Agor to give a holistic interpretation, first of all, of the agenda championed by the Ghanaian president, the resolution from the UN, and of course the reactions, particularly from the supposed repercussions or consequences in modern day Africa.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for this wonderful program and a platform to discuss issues that are affecting especially Africans. Now, when you look at the discussions and you look at the topic we discussed in repatriation, as the earlier speaker indicated, it's so sad. I'm saddened if I hear a political party, a UK Reform Party, threatening that if we are demanding what we think is a crime to humanity, then you don't want to give us visa to visit your country. It's so sad. I am totally devastated and worried that we should hear this thing as continent from our colonial masters. And I think it's a shame to them. It's a shame for a party. I mean, it's one of the small parties, indeed, to make such comments and that statement. It's unfortunate. It's something that they should be calling for historical injustice and then also accountability. And that is a way forward. And try to propose such a thing to deny Africans visa to to visit or to come to their country. I think it's a no way. But rather, I think it's the wounds of slavery and colonialism that remain a raw and unhealed. I mean, it's unfortunate. Now, when you come to Ghana, the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, I will say that, yes, strongly was championing or started this whole conversation, even though it started somewhere in the Caribbean. The President of Ghana made a strong alongside with those in other African countries and the leaders, of course, have indicated that there's an international, the international community has also given attention to this whole discussion. Effect on injustice to African people. And I think it's in the right direction. Our president, the president, was very sure in himself, in the right state of mind, knowing that this is a crime against humanity, that the world should look at it. And talking about compensations and other things, it's not only financial compensation that came out of the discussions, but also, of course, for it to be acknowledged and also render an apology to concrete, put it at the right side to indicate that, of course, it's something that has gone on years that affect African people, and the impact is so huge. And I am surprised that UK abstained from the vote in the UN Assembly voting at the last UN sitting. And that should even tell you that this issue, indicate to us that it gives us some kind of discomfort within the discussions. But rather, and actions. And I think that they should have rather engaged more than have a constructive dialogue with African people. And I think that he has a massive support. But the colonial masters, from the UK point of view, were not being fair because they abstained from the voting. And I think that alone should tell us that they are not much interested in these whole discussions. And for me, like the earlier speaker has indicated, this gives an impression that make sure that economics are well put in place that can help our people know. In recent years, from the University of Glasgow, where operation CARICOM Reparation Commission. And so these discussions have gone on not today. And these efforts demonstrate that reparation are not just a moral, issues, but is a necessary step towards healing and
You're most welcome. I think in the same perspective, especially looking at it from a more cultural perspective, and probably how this slave trade actually
South African-led initiative that can help us to develop. So we should also bring something on the table. Africans must also bring something on the table and discuss it at international level, which I think will help us in this whole conversation. We shouldn't just talk about reparation without having a concrete, developmental agenda to that effect. And I think we can also do that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Mr. Kofi, and without much ado, let's get the holistic interpretation of the stakes of the UK Reform Party's statement, especially at this time that the world is reviewing, the dynamics of international relations with you.
Can we start again because your line was not too clear. Your line was not too clear.
Ambe Fokwa, coming to you.
Your line was not too clear.
Yes, I'm following you.
What do you have to say regarding the statement from the UK Reform Party regarding the UN resolution on slavery, and how will this translate into the Africa wanting to navigate this form of weaponizing visa coming from the UK, patterning its agenda on slavery?
Well, actually, Clarisse, I want to take the discussion a little bit deeper, you see, because I've reflected on the stance that the Reform UK Party has taken, even that of Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader, who, if you look at some of the reasons that they are advancing from a self-reliant perspective, you can actually start to reason that they are distancing themselves from being held liable for reparations, because the actual moral and legal responsibility of the pronouncement of Africans as chattel slaves was not originated in, or did not originate with, the British monarchy. If we are to discuss reparations seriously, then we must first establish responsibility correctly. And at the time of the transatlantic slave trade, What we now recognize as chattel slavery was not only practiced, but it was legally and morally sanctioned under the prevailing international order of that era. Now, that order was not secular. It was governed by canon law under the authority of the Holy See, the Roman Catholic Church. In 1452, specifically, the papal bull Dum Diversas authorized Christian rulers to subjugate non-Christian peoples into perpetual servitude. This was not a marginal document. It formed the basis of what later evolved into the doctrine of discovery, which structured European expansion globally. So we must be precise. The British Crown did not originate this system. It operated within a legal and theological framework already established and sanctioned by the papacy. European monarchies, including Britain, were acting under a doctrine that functioned as international law at the time. This does not remove moral tragedy. That's not what I'm saying. In the context of the UN Resolution 80AL.84. If slavery is now recognized as a crime against humanity, who legitimized it? Who provided the legal doctrine that made it permissible? Because without that authorization, there is no system. So while political reactions today, such as be controversial, the underlying legal question they raise cannot be dismissed. Reparations must follow responsibility, and responsibility must be traced back to its source.
Quite timely.
Lobbied by the Church of England. So we are looking now at a situation where the Vatican, which is specifically responsible, has not been brought to court. And America even, we know that they decided to actually specifically vote against this bill, and they cited that because at the time that the chattel slavery was practiced, it was recognized and accepted morally and legally. So when we start tracing the legal institution and precedents upon which this whole concept of reparations is based, before we see Reform UK taking this position, it's because we as Africans have not truly identified who is responsible. And until we do, I don't think we're actually going to get the real resolution that we're looking for.
And if let me stay with you, Mr. Ambiya, from what you have said, it means that at this juncture, we should be looking at the African agenda after the UN recognizing slavery as a heinous act of the gravest, crime committed against humanity. So from this perspective, what analysis can we actually give towards practicalizing Africa's agenda to see that these calls do not only remain in paper, but it should maybe transcend or align with Africa's agenda of cultural, political, economic, and social emancipation?
Well, let me just be blatant, Clarice. Not expect this organization to just come forward and, snap its fingers, poof, give some trillions of dollars, come into our continent, start restructuring our academic system to speak positively about ourselves, to reverse our economic system like we see individuals like Captain Traore is already doing, change the religious system so that we can formulate a collective consciousness for our people that positive. You see, all of these things that I'm saying, we don't need to go and ask the UN for reparations to do these things. We can start on our own. For me, the whole premise of reparations in the UN resolutions, it's just, it's like a symbolic precedent. Knowing that we can't enforce the legitimacy. The US already has nuclear weapons, anticipating the day that anyone would try it to say that you did something wrong in the past. We don't have that type of capacity to force the legitimacy of this solution. But we can do it. Hope that those individuals and organizations that are the culprits of it would find some moral position in their heart to feel sorry for it, like they did with the Jewish Holocaust, like they've attempted to do with the original nations in the Americas, the Japanese, those natures, and look at us to try and do something. But if they don't, honestly, my plan as a Traore is truly rooted in Garveyism. I practice self-reliance, and I always advocate to other Africans that irrespective of us asking for what is our own from outside. Self-reliance must begin here. We must begin to now start to formulate inter-ethnic, well, I don't like the word tribal, because we have original nations. Now they like to use the word ethnic. We should be forming corporate borders, like we talk about in the context of the African Free Continental Trade Agreement, to lead us towards actually creating that real African society from the grassroots that will start to accomplish these things that we feel we need to ask people for reparations for. That's my own perspective, because we're not going to stop continuing to people who have been disenfranchised, irrespective of the conditions that we are facing.
To meet Professor Laïd Zeglemi, and of course when it comes to political statement and interpretation, it is very vital. In our preamble, Professor Laïd, we asked a question if actually what the UK Reform Party said was some sort of a political statement, or probably can we interpret it as a diplomatic blunder. And from your own perspective, we also want to have, a general interpretation of such a statement, contextualizing it in the diplomatic relationship between the United Kingdom and African countries.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Professor Laïd, the question was directed to you. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm telling you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's explain to start with that the resolution that was endorsed by the resolution regarding of course reparation and from all colonized countries in Africa. Most of countries which supported were from the global south. It's clear 3 countries was firstly opposed to it: Israel, Argentina, and USA. And more Western countries have abstained. What does it mean? It means, okay, we're good for, of course, we have to congratulate Africa for having reached, but still, it's just that it's a diplomatic victory, and more is needed to pressure the Western countries to accept that they were, of course, under accusation for colonizing the continent. And it's clear that this is a slap in their face for, first of all, not accepting the idea that they were colonizing the country. They were taking all the richness of the wealth of the country. And of course, they have to be blamed, and shame on them and blame on them for not admitting behind all the misery of the country, the continent. So having said that, of course, it's a diplomat. My congratulations for the president of Ghana for having submitted this resolution. But this is not enough. It's only the beginning. The beginning. Should now exert more power on in international the admission, the acknowledgement of what the Western colonization had done to Africa. But we should ask for moral and material reparation. That's what Algeria has been asking France for its colonization of Algeria 132 years. Having said that, we should accept that, of course, Africa, through not only through the president of Ghana, but African Union itself should long process of asking for more justice, because we until now we can see the sequels of the past. And more importantly, what I want to say, African citizens that are now settled in Europe, in Western countries, USA, UK, France, and his policy, the ideology of his party is based on hating and of course of discriminating foreigners and mainly immigrants. And we remember what happened a few we should remind Windrush, it means they were stigmatizing all Africans coming from Caribbean region, and they came to build, by the way, to build the economy of Britain. And now, because they are getting old, they don't need them anymore. They want to send them back to their respective country. So racism and they bring them back to their country to build their countries, and then once they use them in of course constructing the economy and social infrastructure and so forth, now they don't need them anymore. They impose very restrictive attitude to expel them. And we see it's not innocent that in most Western countries the emergence of right-wing parties, whether in USA with supremacists, or UK with, of course, Reform Party, or in France with National Rally, Marine Le Pen, and so forth. All of Europe now, most of the European countries have seen the rise of right wing at the expense of the immigrant, whether they are from of course scapegoat for their own internal policy. We should fight for it, and of course let's remind ourselves, does not accept the rules of the power of the dominant consumees. It means they won't accept the hegemony. And so what I want to say, there is the emergence of a new immigrant, former immigrant. Now they are part of the political.
Another question. There is another participant here, Mr. Ukwemi, I believe.
Okay, he just joined
Ukwemi,
us.
Yeah, he just joined. Maybe he should,
okay.
Yeah, he can.
Thank you so much, for that. While we welcome Dr. Andy, thanks for joining us. And of course, without much ado, let's have your holistic, especially geopolitical interpretation of such a statement coming from the UK Reform Party pertaining the weaponization of visa. Should countries, demand reparations or compensation for the or inhumane acts of slavery committed hundreds of years ago, whereas we are still living the consequences of such acts?
Okay, Clarisse, thank you so much. And at such a time when it is considered timely and quite heart-lifting, because this sounds like the sound of freedom. This sounds like the voices of justice now ringing a louder bell, so that everyone is dancing to the music of freedom. Efforts making a reasonable call for to be reconciled, right? The reconciliation of consider that a wrongful call or a wrongful conduct, if you like. Before we proceed, I'd like us to take a little jump on. I'll start with the post-World War I. By the end of of World War One, you would realize that Germany was forced into reparation because after the war there was need for proper reconciliation. Do not forget that countries do not live or function in isolation. Existential relationship that brings them regionally, globally together. And the central focus of every relationship, at the center of every relationship, away from the First World, in the Second World War, we have the Organization of Development, we have development of Organization of Economic Development countries coming together on what is called official development assistance. The intention was to lighten the burden that was brought by